Tonight we need to study together the important subject of protecting our children from predators. It is the case that children are valuable. They're valuable to God. They're valuable to each of us. But it is also the case that children are extremely vulnerable because of their vulnerability, because they are some of the weakest members of our society. They absolutely must be protected. Jesus loves the little children. Those of us that also love the little children of the world, we're going to make it our business to do the best we can do, with God's help, to have a church that is safe for children, to have schools that are safe for children, to have a community that is safe for children, to have families that are safe for children. I'm reading now from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 18. This is the King James Version. This is beginning with verse 1. Gives us some idea of Jesus' attitude towards children and to those who would prey upon these vulnerable children. And at the same time came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus, now he shocked them when he did this, he called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted, you make some changes, and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, you can just see the little child beaming in the lap of Christ as he's saying this, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoso shall receive one such little one in my name, receiveth me. Now notice verse 6, it is ominous. But whoso shall offend, harm, bother one of these little ones, these vulnerable children, which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. That's not confusing, is it? To see the feeling that Jesus has towards children and towards those who would be predators of children. This is an interesting passage I've read for several reasons. It's especially interesting when we understand how people ranked, how people compared to other people, the priority system, the caste system, if you will, that people assigned to other people back in that day. At the top of the food chain was the wealthy man. Underneath the wealthy man was just regular old men. Underneath them, as you go down a little bit, you'd find the slave, the male slave. Underneath the male slave, then, you would have listed in importance in their society and culture, woman. And then at the bottom, you'd find the child. So Jesus is talking to some disciples who maybe haven't been valuing the importance, the place in culture and society, and ultimately in His church that belong to children. So He's saying, let's move these that are weakest, most vulnerable up to the top of the list, and let's make it our high priority to keep them safe, to keep them protected from any and all harm. And here's how I feel, he's saying, about those who would harm these innocents, these weak, these vulnerable. It's better for them to be drowned in the depth of the sea than to even hurt one of these little ones. That's his message, not just to the folks back then, but that's his message to his disciples, to his church today. We got to make it a priority. protect our children from all threats, from any and all predators. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8 that Jaden has read previously. Be sober. Pay attention, saying. Be vigilant. Really pay attention. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, and we got a big one out there, your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. In those days, public enemy number one, predator number one, was a lion. Those who read Peter's letter, they probably knew folks who had been wounded or killed by this predator, the roaring, hungry lion. Peter's readers knew about the practice of those Caesars to use these roaring, ferocious, hungry, angry lions as weapons against Christians, to torture them, to torment them, and to consume them violently in the arena. So when he's talking about this adversary, he's using imagery that would get the attention of the church, that would get the attention of the readers. And I would suggest that these days there continues to be a predator that is walking about this community, every community. He is stalking. He is seeking to devour the weakest, the most vulnerable, the most innocent. He's seeking children. And I'm speaking especially of those who we would call pedophiles or child molesters. In this community and in communities around our country and around this world, there are many children who have been devoured by these predators. It is impossible to get accurate statistics because a lot of people who have been victimized keep it to themselves till they go to the grave. But best research indicates, and this is a shocking statistic, 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused by somebody before they turn age 18. There are about 40 million victims of sexual predators in America. And of these 40 million, we're talking now only about those who were assaulted prior to turning age 18. And there are some victims of these predators that are found in our Lord's church. The statistics tell a sad story, but also it is the case that our headlines tell a tragic yet familiar story. These are headlines just from the past few days. Boy Scouts, they got some files that have just been opened up, and these files reveal a long history of child sex abuse cases. And there is a long history of should have been responsible of adults who were guilty of routinely looking the other way. United Nations issued a report condemning the Vatican, that's the head of the Roman Catholic Church, over as the report put it, the systematic sex abuse of tens of thousands of children. Again, there were a lot of folks looking the other way. University of Penn State will pay, recent headline, will pay $59.7 million to 26 victims in the Jerry Sandusky sex abuse scandal. Headlines also remind us how immoral some can be in the entertainment industry. Now this was an event, this first headline, it references an event that occurred several decades ago, but this headline is recent because the woman who was sexually assaulted at age 13 has now written a memoir about that event. U.S. woman sexually assaulted by Roman Polanski tells her story in a memoir. And again, friends, she was just 13. She was taken by this director, and he doesn't dispute this. He just said it was okay because it was consensual sex. He took her to the actor Jack Nicholson's house. He got this girl intoxicated with champagne and sleeping pills, put her in a hot tub. Her mother allowed her to go with this older director, movie director, because he said he wanted to take some pictures of this little girl, wanted to make her a star. Roman Polanski was convicted, and during the midst, and some of you may remember some of this, during the midst of the sentencing and all, he ran off to London, then ultimately to France, and France will not send him back to America to face justice. He's been captured another time or two since then, and those countries have refused to send him back to America again to face justice. He has continued, this director has, to make many movies, and not that long ago he was going to Zurich to receive, get this, a Lifetime Achievement Award. This is a man by his own admission. Not just assaulted this 13-year-old girl, but did it multiple other times with other young girls. R. Kelly is a name that may be familiar to a few of you. He is a rhythm and blues entertainer. This is a recent headline, again about events that occurred some time ago. R. Kelly's alleged sex crimes are still horrific 13 years later. It's really hard for juries to convict famous people, wealthy people, entertainers. It's real hard for prosecutors to step up and do what they ought to do when it comes to personalities like this. This fella actually videotaped his crime, not his alleged crimes. He actually videotaped his crimes against these young girls. And there were multiple events, multiple videos of this. But because he's wealthy, in many cases, he paid the girls, paid their families, and he still does not face judgment. And I believe it was just this past Christmas, he released an album of Christmas songs. And the entertainment industry says, it's no big deal. Woody Allen, adopted daughter. This is another recent headline. Woody Allen's adopted daughter details alleged sexual abuse in an open letter. Dylan Farrow is her name, and she details an event that happened with her adoptive father, Woody Allen, in the attic of their home when she was just 7 years of age. The evidence that she was telling the truth back when she came forward, told her mother, told the authorities, was overwhelming. Prosecutor refused to prosecute because this 7-year-old girl understandably did not want to have to testify in court about her daddy and what he had done. This is the same man that you may recall has married another adoptive daughter of his. And if you read the accounts from various prosecutors, law enforcement, judges, the evidence of his guilt in this and other similar instances is absolutely overwhelming. One of his more recent movies has been nominated for an Oscar. He's still making movies. He's still making millions of dollars. And this next headline that you see, Mia Farrow, that was Woody Allen's wife at the time, mother of these girls. Mia Farrow, this pedophilia, child molestation, is almost like it runs in her family, because not only is her husband alleged to have done it, evidence overwhelming that he did it, but also her brother has now been sentenced to jail. It was a reduced sentence, but it looks like he is going to have to spend at least 10 years in prison for the sustained sexual abuse of two 10-year-old boys, and they were younger than that when he began this abuse. Again, a lot of people looking the other way to allow some of these things to happen. In our community, there are headlines recently Community of Vinas, not too far south and west of here, another Vina coach in sex case resigns. Within the space of 7 days, 2 coaches there in that school system had to resign. Ultimately, it seems, will be prosecuted for crimes against their students that should have been able to trust these coaches. And then in the community of Sheffield, we have this headline: former music and youth minister in Sheffield charged with sex abuse of 8 youth. According to newspaper accounts, there have been rumors for years of this type of behavior associated with this individual in this community. The rumors were fairly rampant. Rumors don't prove anything, of course, but red flags, right? Another recent headline: children's minister faces child sexual abuse charges. Bail set at $1 million. A little bit over $1 million. I'm proud of my friend Judge Chad Coker for setting that kind of bail. The fella has acknowledged, and he's sitting in a jail cell just a couple blocks from where I'm preaching tonight. This fella has acknowledged, gone on record saying that he abused so many children so many times he doesn't remember how many. Much of that abuse happened inside what should be a safe place for families, a safe place for children, inside a church building. Another headline, essentially the same case: Muscle Shoals children's minister charged with child sex abuse, once worked at juvenile detention center. Once worked at juvenile young people, juvenile detention center. Pedophiles go to where the children are. Another recent headline, this statement: we are outraged. That's in our community. We are outraged. That's a good way to be. We ought to be outraged when things like this happen. You notice that there's a familiar pattern of these types of sordid events. There's abuse. Sometimes it happens for a long time. A lot of children. Eventually the abuse is discovered. Somebody courageously comes forward, or somebody is careless and gets caught. Then there is this outrage. How could this have happened? And then we begin with the retribution. We're going to punish somebody for this. And then the prosecutions come. Hopefully they come. And then there's blame. We blame the guilty. Then we blame the various institutions for not being more alert, to not being more proactive and creating a safer environment for the children. And then there are the lawsuits, and then there are years of counseling sessions for all those affected by this crime. But again, there's lots and lots of understandable outrage. If we don't have outrage, it seems to me, then we got issues with ourselves. Now, we talk a lot about what we should be angry about, what we shouldn't be angry about, and my brothers and sisters, those of you that genuinely love children and care about their welfare, this is something that should demand outrage. It demands anger. It demands that we be upset to our core that there are predators in our community that would hurt a child. Outrage is reasonable. But there's something better, isn't there, than outrage. And that is our focus this evening. Prevention. Prevention is better. Protecting before these things is better. So we must protect our children from these predators. What can we do? As individuals, as families, as a church, to keep our children from becoming a headline or from becoming a statistic. Before I get into some specifics, some definitions might be helpful to us. A pedophile, it's a word you'll hear and have heard. A pedophile is a person who is sexually attracted to children. Usually these children are about 13 or under, younger. Pedophiles, by the way, and you got to know this, pedophiles do not look like pedophiles. I started to put up a series of photos tonight of people that have been convicted of molesting children. And you would see from photo after photo after photo, they look like common folks. They look like your kids, not indicting anybody, your kid's neighbor, coach, teacher, preacher. They look like we look. Occasionally, a pedophile might look like a monster. And it's obvious he's got problems. Most of the time, they're well-groomed, well-mannered, charming. These predators are. The child molester is defined as one who actually commits sex crimes against a child. So a pedophile then would be defined by their desires that they have to be with the child. Child molester would be defined by their actions and following through on the pedophilic desires. Child sexual abuse. Some of this is sensitive. Child sexual abuse in any form is any form of sexual activity imposed on a child by an adult or by another child that's in a position of power, authority, or influence. Child sexual abuse can involve such things as touching the intimate parts of a child's body, enticing the child or forcing the child to have sexual relations, or enticing the child to participate in non-touching types of behavior, like obscene communications that might occur over a phone or by texting or by internet or by taking of pornographic pictures or sharing pornographic pictures with the child. So how do we protect our children from these pedophiles, these child molesters, these predators? Number one, some of these will have more value to you than others will, I'm sure. Number one, I am saying that the most effective way to protect your child from a predator is to not allow your child to ever be alone with an adult. This will protect your child. Not only will it protect your child, it will protect an adult from being falsely accused of doing something they should not have done. And I will say this to we adults. We've got to take a hard look, a careful look at our choices and our decisions that we make and the situations we may or may not allow ourselves to be in. And I would powerfully, strongly urge every adult in this house and in this community and those who are watching in other places tonight and in future days, if you're an adult, you need to do your absolute best to avoid ever being in a situation where you are alone with a child that is not your child. You're alone with a child that is not your child, and that child later says that you touched them in an inappropriate way. It is impossible for you to prove your innocence. You can't prove a negative. You can't prove you didn't do it. So how can you avoid that kind of accusation? Never allow yourself to get into a situation where you as an adult are alone with a child. I know that's extreme. Trust me, most of you know me well. I wish that wasn't the way it has to be. I wish our world was a different place. I wish there were no predators. But because there are, we all have to examine our behavior. We all have to make adjustments to maybe the way we have done things in the past. Number two, we protect our children from predators by communicating extensively, consistently with our children. And in this communication, we teach them, and this is so important, we've got to teach our children not to keep any secrets from mom or from dad. That's just got to be an important rule. I'm not going to be keeping secrets from our parents. We got to teach them about boundaries and what a coach should do, what the music piano teacher should do and shouldn't do, what the teacher should or shouldn't do. We got to figure out where everybody's boundaries are and make sure the children understand that. We need to teach our children as we're communicating with them what to do when an adult does anything to make them feel uncomfortable. They immediately got to get away from that adult and let mama know, let daddy know what's going on. We got to teach our children what to do when they're separated from us in a store. And it's real simple. They need to go to an employee, a recognized, dressed-up employee of that store. If that employee of that store tries to take them to a bathroom, to a locker room, to the stock room, the child's got to know to say, I'm not going to do that. Got to be prepared to scream out, this is not my mommy, this is not my daddy. One of the safest options, role play this with your children. Get them to go find a young mama who's got a lot of children. She'll be the mama bear. She'll take care of them and keep them safe until you can be reunited with your child. By the way, as a parent, and it's not on the overhead, but as a parent, one of the things you will need to do quickly if you can't locate your child, you got to stay calm, but you got to go find a manager and you tell him to either lock every door or have someone monitor every door and not let your child leave that building. It'll be scary when a child gets separated in these big, dangerous stores. Keep your eye on your children. Got to teach them to never go anywhere with a stranger. Now, one of the advantages that these predator strangers have, and a stranger, actually I said 9 out of 10 are abused by somebody they know. It's actually 93% is the most recent research. There's 7% of those victimized are being victimized by a complete stranger, and it's very rare that that happens. But one of the advantages a stranger has is the element of surprise. They just catch a child unawares, and before the child can figure out what's happening, they're in a vehicle, they're in a van, and they're being whisked away to a dangerous place. And we need to work with our children. And there are some experts who differ on this point, but most experts would say, here's what we need to do. They would say that we need to communicate with our children and tell them never get in a vehicle with a stranger. If that stranger has a gun, if that stranger has a knife, whatever, do not get in that. If we're going to fight, let's fight right there. Let's fight right there. If they're going to hurt us, they're going to have to hurt us in a public place. And we got to scream, we got to fight, we got to scratch, we got to claw, we got to kick. That's the place. That's the place for the battle if there's going to be one. Not in the predator's world. These are tough things, but these are important things. We also, in communicating with our children, we need to develop a code word system. And let me explain what I mean by that. You know, there may be some cases where your child is a certain place and you need an adult that you trust to go and pick up your child. Well, your child needs to know to never go with any of those trusted adults unless those adults know the code word. And so your family's code word could be something like John the Baptist. Okay? And so they go to pick up little Jeff at school, and Jeff says to this uncle who's going to give him a ride, all right, we got a code word, we got a secret word in my family. Do you know the word? If that uncle hauls around, if he doesn't know to say John the Baptist to me, I'm not going with him. It's a simple thing, but it can save a life. Don't allow your child to be alone with adults. Communicate with your child. Number 3, know the predator's methods. Know the predator's methods. And we can know a lot about the predator's methods because once caught, convicted, captured, they're pretty talkative about their ways, and some can be helpful with the information they share. As I've mentioned, over 90% of predators are known by the victim. And the goal of the predator is to gain the trust of the child, the trust of the parent, so ultimately they can be alone with that child. Most pedophiles are going to be targeting children who are lonely, children who are extra trusting. Oftentimes they'll be targeting children who come from single-parent homes. And these predators will often spend months, even years, Building trust. That's called grooming, and we'll talk more about grooming in a few moments. Building trust with the family and with the child. Because the predator understands that once trust is established, access is then granted. Pedophiles have got to have trust. They've got to have access. They've got to have secrecy. We also, number 4, need to supervise as best we can our children's extracurricular activities. We need to make it clear to anyone who will be observing our child that we are an involved parent. We are present as much as we can be with our children, that they're not out there lonely looking for someone to come in and fill the role of parent or mom or dad. Number 5, you hire a babysitter, you've got to consider strongly setting up what you call a nanny cam. These things are real inexpensive now, and you can set them up in a discreet place, and you can see how well the babysitter is caring for your child. Number 6, protecting our children from predators. We got to teach our children about the danger of the internet. Teach them how to stay safe while they're online. Be sure that your child knows never send a picture to somebody they don't know, and maybe they shouldn't be sending some pictures to some people they do know. Should obviously never agree to meet somebody that they have gotten to know by communicating with them online. And there's a whole lot more, as you know, that can be said about the internet. I may touch on a couple things as we're drawing to a close a little bit later. Number 7, as we're trying to protect our children from predators, we need to teach them to recognize what is inappropriate touching. Inappropriate touching. Children can be confused. They're little. They don't know what's good touching or bad touching or dangerous touching. So mom and dad get to teach that. And bath time, by the way, is a good time to teach our little children these things. But essentially, we're teaching our children that nobody is allowed to touch him or her in their private areas. In private areas, we can just simply define that as areas that would be covered by a bathing suit. We've got to teach our children to say no and to walk away if anybody tries to touch him or her in that private zone. Tell your children, there's all this good communication going on, to come to you immediately if someone touches or seeks to touch them in a bad way. And this is important also. If your child just doesn't seem to want to be around a certain adult, it may be wise not to force the issue. There may be something going on, at least in that child's gut, that says that person is a threat to me. So let's be careful about that. If a child reports abuse, if they say they've been touched inappropriately, you need to believe them. You need to believe them. Some children lie, make up stories, but the vast majority of children, according to a pile of research, the vast majority of children, if they say that somebody did something inappropriate to them, they are telling the truth, and it needs to be treated as such. I mentioned grooming earlier. Talk about the stages of grooming. That's the process where a pedophile tries to build trust with the child's family. First, the pedophile will identify a potential victim. Now, pedophiles have different types of appearance, right? They have different genders, different ages. As I mentioned earlier, they're rarely going to look like the monsters that they really are. But essentially, all pedophiles look for a certain type of victim. And one of the common denominators of victims of pedophiles, and there are exceptions, but most all of them are demonstrating some type of vulnerability, some type of distress in their life, and the pedophile can step in and be the hero, make things better. So they start looking for the victim. And then second, in this grooming process, they start gathering information about the child. This can come just through general conversation with the child, with the parents of the child, with the grandparents of the child, and also some Information can be gathered from various social media sites like Facebook. And moms and dads, we got to be careful. The pictures that we're putting out there for the world to see of our children, and the private, personal information that we're putting out there. Maybe some of that is a little bit excessive, and we need to give some careful thought to that. In connection with this, of sharing information about our children with the world, we need to be careful about, and this kind of some new thought, but important thought, we need to no longer put their names on their clothing that they're wearing in public. We don't need to have their names on their lunchbox as they're getting off the bus and going in the classroom, because one of the safest sounds to a child is the sound of their name. Some stranger sees their name on a jersey, on a book. Hey, Joe, how you doing? And a child just instinctively believes if someone knows their name, they know them. If they know me, they know my name, I can trust this person. So the pedophile is collecting information, goes to various places where children are, observes which child doesn't ever seem to have a parent around, which child seems to be a loner, which child seems to be sad about something and could be blessed by me in their life. And all that comes with the goal of sexually assaulting that child. And then, in part of the grooming process, this predator, after he's identified the need, now he tries to fill the need. If he sees that this is a child that doesn't have much money, doesn't have much nice stuff, well, he'll fill that need by giving the child nice stuff and some money. If he sees that this child is lonely, then the pedophile, very glad to step in and be somebody that will listen to this boy or this girl and talk to them. If the child seems to be down on themselves, lacking self-esteem, and this pedophile step in and meet that need. Boost them. You're fantastic. You're wonderful. Why don't your mom and dad say that to you? Maybe this predator will see that the child has a need for a ride. I'll give you a ride. Already built established trust with the family. Maybe sees that the child is struggling with schoolwork. I'm pretty good in math. I'll help you with that. Again, now a lot of people are doing good things for children. It's noble, it's wonderful. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are offering their services for the purpose of being alone with that child to do bad things to that child. Don't want to discourage anybody here from seeking to do good things for children. But we can do a lot of good things for children without having to be alone with that child. Red flags that we may want to pay special attention to if an adult seems overly interested in a child. Now, as Christians, we're all interested in children. And we've got to be interested in children. We've got to love them. We've got to train them. We've got to encourage them. We've got to be a blessing to them. We've got to model good behavior for them. But if we start noticing adults to be obsessive in their interest of a child, then maybe a red flag needs. I'm not saying that that's a definitive marker of something about to happen or being plotted or planned. I'm just saying, let's pay attention to that. These local cases, somebody wasn't paying attention to adults paying too much attention to individual and children in one-on-one situations. Red flag, an adult frequently initiates or creates opportunities. This is key here, to be alone with a child. Adult gives special privileges to a child. 99.9% of the time, we know this. Somebody offers to give your child a ride. Innocent, harmless, helpful. No doubt about that. But every now and then it can get somebody into trouble. An adult befriends a family and then in turn shows more interest in building a relationship with the child in the family than the adults in the family. Just a red flag needs to go up. And this is one that you'll see with many child molesters and pedophiles in their behavior. They begin to display favoritism towards one particular child in the family over the other children. Another red flag, an adult finds opportunities to buy a child gifts. And we're talking here generally about more expensive gifts. We're not talking about the Christian things that we would do to be a blessing to children. Again, we're talking about one who has the motive to ultimately build trust so you can be alone with this particular child. And then the next stage of this grooming process is the lowering of inhibitions. We've gained trust with a child, we've gained trust with a family, we can now be alone with this child, and so the pedophile is going to start to lower the child's inhibitions and start to make bad things not seem like such bad things. And may begin to come up with some games or activities that involve a lot of physical contact. And initially, the contact seems very innocent, some tickling, some wrestling and touching. And then ultimately, it proceeds to getting undressed and maybe making some sexual comments to the child, and maybe showing some pictures to the child of other children who are undressed to make it seem like a natural thing to be in this particular situation. In almost, well, I won't say almost all of the Hollywood cases or the entertainment world cases of child molestation, I will say it this way, in many of them, in those cases, the entertainment industry folks, they use alcohol. They use drugs to lessen the inhibitions of the child, to get them into a more stupefied condition where they can be more easily taken advantage of. I'm sorry. Again, I just feel the need to stop and say, I'm sorry to have to say this. You know that, right? I mean, I asked for a show of hands. Anybody want to say this? Anybody want to talk about this? I don't think anybody raise your hand you want to do this. And maybe that's the reason some of this happens still in too many places, in too many churches, in too many families. As distasteful as it is, don't we need to talk about some of these? Don't we need to think about some of these things? And then stage 5 of this grooming process, the abuse begins and the child is sexually assaulted. There are tricks that many pedophiles have that I want to list for you quickly. And these are called by various names by various professionals who study such matters a lot more frequently than I do. One is called the apple of my eye trick. Everybody loves to be the apple of somebody's eye, the center of attention. Pedophiles just shower their victims with lots of attention. Accidental touching trick. Begin to touch in an appropriate place and the hand slips over to an inappropriate place to see how the response is. Assistance lure trick, as it's called. Pedophile will say, I need you to help me with something. I need you to help me find my pet. I know of one situation where the pedophile asked a child to go help him with a thermostat or to check a girl's restroom to see if it was empty. Or just, kids want to help, and pedophiles know that. And not just offering or asking the child to help the pedophile, but the pedophile says, hey, I'll help you. I'll help you with some task. We're close. You need a ride, need a babysitter, need tutoring. I'm your guy. The authority trick. We've been conditioned in our culture to look up to authority figures, and some child molesters have taken advantage of the child's natural inclination to respect those who wear a uniform, to respect those who are in positions of boss in some way in their life. The desensitized trick, already touched on it a little bit. They just show lots of pictures of other children doing inappropriate things, and they're just kind of conditioning the child to think, hey, this isn't such a bad thing to do after all. Mentioned the drug and alcohol trick used to incapacitate. Even King David tried this with Uriah long ago because he knew that if you get somebody intoxicated, what has been, no, I won't do that, because, well, maybe I will do that. And then there's this emergency trick, as it's called, a crisis, right? We're creating a crisis with this child that can be kind of confusing, and we got some kind of emergency situation. Your parents have been wounded in some type of accident, and they told me to get you to the hospital. And the adrenaline starts pumping, and we all can make mistakes when there are emergency things going on. Role play is a very good thing to think about in that regard. This fame trick, again, it's more of a Hollywood issue and maybe a Nashville issue, but there are many girls and boys victimized by somebody who said, "You come with me, I'll make you a star." And parents fall for that also. A lot of kids, a lot of adults, we want to be a star, right? This friendship trick, and this is one that has been used by a lot of older children on younger children. If you won't do this with me, then I'm not going to be your friend anymore. And that's a powerful motivation for some children. Games trick, we're playing games, wrestle game, tickle game, games where certain private parts of our bodies will ultimately begin to contact. This hero trick or special privileges trick, as it's been called, where the child wants to be heroic, wants to be well thought of, or they idolize the person in their life. This pedophile has built themselves up. I'm a special person, and we want to be liked by these heroes in our lives, these special people. We want their approval, and so we don't want to disappoint them. We don't want to say no to these kinds of folks. And a lot of times these hero figures in our life, they can give us special privileges. The teacher can do special things for us. The coach can do special things for us as long as we're willing to keep certain secrets and do what they want us to do. And then this "I know you" trick that I referenced earlier, got to keep strangers from knowing the names of our children unless it's absolutely essential that they know the names of our children. This job trick, where children are offered a high-paying job if they do just the most simple of tasks. And a lot of times these jobs require the child to come to the person's office and work, or come to their home in a private place and work. And then there's the outing trick. A lot of successful, wealthier pedophiles have used this, where they would take a child one-on-one to a trip, to a special place where they can be alone. And moms and dads, well, okay, my kid doesn't get to go to special places too much. I'll let them go with so-and-so. And that's a trick that some pedophiles have used effectively. There's the pet trick I mentioned earlier. They'll show up with a picture of the pet, with a leash. Even some pedophiles have walked around various communities with an empty leash saying, "Would you help me find my dog? Here's the leash." Every child wants to be helpful. Again, pedophiles know that. And then there is this teaching trick. We'll stay after practice. I'll teach you how to hit a curveball. I'll teach you how to make free throws. We'll work with you on your piano recital, just you and me. We'll do some extra. And again, folks, I've been a coach. I've been there and done that. And 99.9% of the time, the motives were pure. Everybody was where they needed to be morally, spiritually, and hands in the right places and all that. I'm just saying the rules have changed now. I wish they hadn't have changed, but the rules have changed now. And if you're a teacher, coach, preacher, whatever, teach that child in the presence of other children or in the presence of mom and dad. There are other ways to do it other than one-on-one or alone with that particular child. It's going to get us in trouble if we don't change some of those methods that maybe we've used in the past. This threat trick. You've read a lot about, probably you've read a lot if it didn't disgust you too much and you didn't read it at all, but if you read some of these more well-known cases where the Boy Scout troop leaders were involved in sexually abusing the Boy Scouts, in some case maybe the Girl Scouts. One of the more well-known cases involved a fella, and what he did, he would use some alcohol with these boys, get them to drink it. He would commit sexual crimes with these boys, and then he would tell them, "If you tell anybody about what I have done, I will kill you. And not only will I kill you, if I do go to jail, when I get out, I'll kill your mom and I'll kill your dad." Now, boys and girls love their moms and dads and will do anything, literally, to make sure they're safe, even endure the abuse at the hands of an adult if it means they're keeping mom and dad safe. And then there is the costume trick. Some pedophiles will wear a costume to draw kids to them. And again, most people that wear costumes are not interested in anything deviant or bad, but Some are. And we just, again, need to pay attention. We just need to pay attention. Some signs of abuse, as I'm starting to wrap all this up, the behavioral signs. I don't want to talk much about the signs of abuse because I want us to prevent abuse. I want us to protect our children from ever having these issues. But the behavioral signs are a lot more common than the physical signs. The behavioral signs, these are obvious things. Won't spend a lot of time on this. Depression, anxiety, anger, loss of appetite, withdrawal from normal activities, substance abuse, self-mutilation, fear of certain places, fear of certain people, bedwetting, night sweats, nightmares, thoughts of suicide, and then maybe the child just is using some sexual words that they shouldn't know just yet in their lives, but somehow they know those words. Where they learn those words. And I'm not saying that if your child has these symptoms or signs, it means they're being sexually abused. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying these are some signs of some children who have been targeted successfully by predators. Physical signs can include redness, swelling, bleeding, itching, or pain in private areas, nausea, urinary tract infections, bladder infections, yeast infection, difficulty walking or urinating. What do you do if you suspect abuse? You don't have to have overwhelming evidence, but if you just suspect abuse, what do? You need to report it to DHR. You need to report it to the police department, DHR, Department of Human Resources. Our own Betsy Puckett, she's one of the first lines of defense against good families and good children, against predators. If you have a desire for more information about these things, and I have not shared nearly the breadth and depth of the subject tonight, you know that. But if you need more information, you can talk to Betsy and other people. By the way, I asked Betsy if I could say this, and she kind of said I could. But if you've disagreed with anything I've said tonight, take it up with Betsy. She's the expert, and she tends to agree with most everything I've shared with you tonight. She would have put it much better in her own conversations to you, though, the information that I've tried to share. How can churches protect children? How can churches protect children? Number one, we must conduct background checks. I'm sorry. I'm sorry again, but the world has changed and we've got to change with it. Conduct background checks on all staff, all teachers, all nursery workers, anyone who's going to have consistent access to children. And you know Tuscumbia does that thanks to Betsy and others here in our congregation. Churches need to enforce a no adult will be alone with a child policy unless that child belongs to the adult. And I'm proud of our teachers. This puts a burden on our teaching program to have 2 adults in these small children classes and all. But our education committee is stepping up and helping us with this particular policy. And all of our staff is united in the enforcement and the practice of this. We're not going to be alone with your child. Just not going to do it. Number 3, we need to have windows on all office doors and all classroom doors. That's just a good, safe thing. When I first came to Tuscumbia, one of the first things I asked Charles or somebody around here to do was, please get a window on my office door. Every preacher, and there'll be preachers watching this from various places, every preacher, you're listening to me tonight, if you don't have a window in your office door, you're asking for trouble and you need to get a window. You can still have the privacy you need for various counseling sessions, but get a window on that door. Youth ministers, we all need to do that. Number 4, encourage parent participation in their child's activities. You've noticed that with so many of our activities, especially I'm noticing even more and more with Thad's activities with the TNT, he's just begging the parents, come, be a part of this, participate with us. You see, we want to be a church that's getting parents and kids closer together, not having activities that separate, put a gap between us and our children. Eli does the same as well, and I'm thankful for that. Number 5, churches to keep children safe need to report any suspicious behavior. Now, if you call me, that's fine and good. I'd kind of like to know. But you got to call the police. The elders want to know. That's good and healthy to let them know. But we got to let the police know. We got to let the folks at DHR know. We got to do that immediately. We got to do that immediately. No self-investigation is likely to be thorough. It's not likely to be timely. It's not likely to be sufficient. If you're a victim, what do? It's very possible in a crowd this size tonight we have some who have been victimized. You saw the earlier statistics, 1 out of 4 boys, 1 out of 1 out of 4 boys, 1 out of 6 girls, something like that. There's a lot of folks been victimized. And so if you are sitting here tonight or you know someone who has been a victim, maybe this can be of help, but you really need to tell somebody who can help you, number one. Number two, you need to report that crime. One of the reasons you report that crime is to prevent that molester from doing to others what has been done to you. And then number three, you've got to realize this was not your fault. Not in any way, shape, or fashion was it your fault. It was the fault of the person who hurt you. It was the fault of the devil who is alive and well in our world. Number four, you need to know that this terrible event will not permanently ruin your life. It doesn't have to do that for you. What happened to you does not have to define you. It doesn't have to wreck and ruin you permanently. With God's help, you can be happily married. With God's help, you can raise healthy children. With God's help, you can live a wonderful life in spite of the crime that was inflicted upon you. Here's some encouraging news in this dark subject we've looked at tonight. This comes from a professor named David Finkelhor. He's a PhD, supposedly a real smart fella, who's done a lot of research in this area. He says this: sexually abused children who receive support and help can and do heal. Now don't interpret this that he's minimizing what's been done to the child. Not doing that at all. But he's saying there's a light at the end of this dark tunnel. And he's director of University of New Hampshire's Crimes Against Children Research Center. Also, this research shown that the majority, there are exceptions, but the majority of sexually abused kids grow up with no significant mental health or behavioral problems. And that's if certain factors are involved, and these factors are listed here that can be very helpful. A lot of social support, a lot of church support, self-esteem building in the life of the child. The child realizes it was not their fault, and then there are some psychologists and psychiatrists and experts that can really help out in helping these children to overcome the trauma that they've been through. But one of the keys to this is to get us, those of you that may be, or you know somebody who's been a victim, to speak up. To speak up and speak out and not keep this secret any longer, because keeping the secret, it tends to reinforce the feelings of shame that can affect our ability to go on and have a better life. You see, by speaking up, we're robbing that perpetrator of their most powerful weapons, shame and fear. We rob them of that, and we can have a better life. I was going to, at this time, lead us in prayer for a safer world and for all of the victims of predators everywhere. But I was so impressed with the prayer that we've already had from Brother Hall this evening. If I tried to say any more, I'd take away from what he said. I cannot and will not diminish the eloquence that I heard from our brother from this pulpit. But what he said, I'm convinced, needs to be said by all of us. And it will be heard by God. We need to pray for the victims of those who've been harmed by these monsters. We need to pray for this community. We need to pray for this church that will do an even better job moving forward to make sure our children are kept safe. We need to be doing a better job educating ourselves as to the techniques of pedophiles. We need to do a better job of communicating with our children these things. We need to pray to God that He will assist us in this journey so that we can build a wall between the pedophile, the child molester, and our children that is so wide and so high that it cannot be penetrated, it cannot be climbed. You know, Job, what's he praying? He's praying for this hedge of protection. And he needs that for himself. He needs that for his children. And our children need the same. I'm going to say it again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we live in a world where there are monsters. I'm sorry we live in a place where there are people that hurt children. I'm sorry that we need to discuss these things. But I hope and I pray that in us discussing this and studying this, that maybe we'll get some information that we can use to better protect our own children, or that we can pass on to others that they can use to protect their children. Mike is going to lead us in a song of invitation. If you have some challenges in your life that we can pray with you about tonight, we're anxious to do that. If there are those who are ready tonight to become a child of God in the waters of baptism, having all your sins washed away. You have that opportunity now to confess your belief in Jesus and be immersed for the forgiveness of every sin, and then get ready to inherit everlasting life. If we can help you, I hope you'll come now while together we stand and sing.
Why keep Jesus waiting, waiting at the door? He will bear you gently, gently to his fold. Sing soul and open, I implore. Why keep Jesus waiting?